Two foreign pilots intentionally almost hit some boats in a reservoir in Colorado on the anniversary of 9/11, but then they immediately regretted it when they crashed the plane. Now the FBI got involved, and there's a lot more to the story that you probably haven't heard about until now. This incident took place on September 11th, 2022 at the Horsetooth Reservoir just outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. Now this is a very scenic area, and it's late on a Sunday afternoon, and you've got some local residents that are just trying to enjoy their time out on the reservoir. Meanwhile, around 6:30 p.m., two pilots had just taken off in their Cessna 172 from Boulder Municipal Airport. Now the pilot in the left seat is Hamad El-Qada. He's from Cairo, Egypt, and he holds a commercial pilot certificate, and he claims he has a total of about 7,000 hours of flight time. Now the crazy thing about this is that I'm pretty sure this is the same Hamad El-Qada that was the co-pilot on Egypt Air Flight 181 that was hijacked back in March of 2016. In that incident, Hamad volunteered to stay on the plane with the hijacker when they landed in Cyprus, so that way the hijacker would let everyone else get off. And later on, when the guy wasn't looking, Hamad climbed out the window and escaped. Now, I wasn't able to verify that it's the same guy, but they have the same name, same year of birth, and are from the same city in Egypt. They're also both pilots with commercial certificates, a lot of hours of flight time, and his brother said that Hamad is a pilot for an overseas airline, so I'll let you be the judge, as this story only gets more interesting because the brother, Ahmad El-Qada, was flying with him in the right seat of the Cessna. Ahmad has a commercial and airline transport pilot certificate, and he's also a certified flight instructor. Now, his last flight review was 3 months prior to this incident, and that was in an Embraer 145 simulator. He has about 3,500 hours of total time, with 268 hours spent instructing on a Cessna 172. They took off and flew up to the north over the reservoir before turning to the south, and then this is the area where they started flying towards the boats. Stephanie Stamos was on the shore taking some photos, and she snapped all of these images that were pieced together to make this video. And she said that she thought the pilot was flying low because he was in trouble and preparing to crash. But instead of hitting the water, the plane intentionally flew towards one of only 3 boats on the reservoir. One of the individuals on the boat said that the plane got within about 15 to 20 feet of hitting them. According to the NTSB, the plane made a left turn towards the first boat, and then after making a very low pass over it, the plane made a steep climb, followed by a steep right turn, and then flew at a low altitude over the second boat before flying off towards a valley. As the plane tried to climb away from the rising terrain, it crashed into the hillside, and both pilots survived, and that's when all the lies started. The NTSB interviewed Ahmad since he claimed he was the pilot flying when the incident happened, and he first told them that there was an engine malfunction, and to avoid landing on the water or impacting boats on the surface, he elected to make a climbing right turn to the west away from the lake, and the airplane subsequently impacted the rising terrain. But then in a written statement, he claimed that the power was reduced in order to see more scenery. But then he couldn't climb because the elevator was jammed, and the only way he could control the airplane was by using trim and power. The elevator is on the back of the plane, and it's basically the thing that makes the plane go up or down when the pilot pushes or pulls on the yoke, and I'll explain more about it in a minute. But his story gets worse because Ahmed also said that the jammed elevator was the reason why they maneuvered to the reservoir, because they wanted to avoid congested areas, and this gave them room to try to free the jammed elevator by wiggling the flight controls in and out. And that eventually he made a turn to the west into a valley to try to find a place to land. So did they have an engine malfunction, or did they reduce the power to see more scenery, or did they have a jammed elevator? And what did the NTSB and the FBI say about all of this? First of all, it's not very likely that the elevator jammed. That's just not a common malfunction. You've basically got a yoke and then an up cable and a down cable that's attached to the elevator, and it's possible one of the cables broke, but this just results in a partial loss of pitch control. And in that case, you'd either be pitching down or up depending on which cable broke, but you could still control the aircraft. If both cables break, the elevator would basically weather vane freely in the wind, and pushing or pulling on the yoke wouldn't do anything. Now in that case, you could use the elevator pitch trim because that's a separate cable system, but the trim tab is so small relative to the size of the elevator that you wouldn't have much maneuverability with it. So how would an elevator get jammed? Well, there was a separate incident of this happening to another plane where the elevator got stuck in the full nose-up position, but that crew discovered that during the flight control check on the ground before the plane took off. One of the screws connecting the wire to the elevator broke off and got stuck, locking the elevator in place. And this is just one reason why doing a good pre-flight and doing flight control checks on the ground before you go flying is so important. So if these guys did have a jammed elevator over the reservoir, then you aren't going to be able to dive down and then immediately make a steep climbing turn. You could use the power and the flaps and maybe the trim to try to control the pitch, but the first thing you probably want to do, which these pilots didn't do, is just get away from the ground. You want to have plenty of altitude to troubleshoot the problem, and you definitely don't want to turn and point the plane at higher terrain. Now, once you know that you're not going to crash and the plane is under control, you want to get on the radio and declare an emergency. But these guys don't do any of that. So it's pretty obvious that he's made up the entire story. And it was about this point during the interview with the NTSB that Ahmed said he wanted to seek the advice of an attorney. And what I'm going to share with you in a minute about what happens to this guy really makes me mad. But what's crazy to me is that the NTSB didn't even interview the other pilot. They talked to Ahmed in the right seat, but remember that you've got Hamed in the left seat, and I guess they didn't interview him because he wasn't the pilot flying. I mean, wouldn't you want to at least talk to this guy to hear his side of the story to see if it actually matches what his brother is saying? Now, the FBI got involved pretty quickly, and you might be surprised about what they said and the worst part of this whole story. But thankfully, the NTSB wasn't buying any of this. An FAA inspector examined the plane at the crash site and found that flight control continuity was established from the control yokes to all flight control surfaces with no binding or mechanical anomalies noted. They also took a look at the engine and found no mechanical problems that would have precluded normal operation. The reason the FBI got involved was because this happened on the anniversary of 9/11, and it's pretty clear that these guys were intentionally flying towards these boats. I mean, both of these guys collectively have about 10,000 hours of flight time, so they should know exactly what they're doing. But as one of my recent videos proved, it really doesn't matter how many flight hours you have, you can still be completely incompetent. Unfortunately, I'm not sure who was actually flying the plane because the guy they interviewed was obviously telling a bunch of lies, so I'm not sure if he's trying to cover for his brother or what's going on. I think that more likely these two guys were just messing around and just being incredibly stupid and reckless without any regard for their safety or the safety of the people on the boats. And surprisingly, the FBI determined that their actions didn't meet the criteria necessary for federal charges, but the county district attorney ended up charging Ahmed with 5 counts of menacing and 6 counts of reckless endangerment. And the worst part of the whole story that really makes me mad is that Ahmed fled the country shortly after the NTSB interviewed him, and no one knows where he is now. And you'd think that they would have kept track of a foreign pilot involved in an aircraft incident on 9/11, but I guess not. And if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to check out this other one on the screen here, and I'll see you next time.